We have 1 month of this law being in operation, and now we have opportunities for our higher education, and opportunities always present some challenges, of course, naturally. So we have to do it for the beneficiary, for the society, for the public, not for the bureaucracy, for the new red tapes. So I would like to turn the floor to Mr. Yegor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, this is a very timely roundtable. I would like to have as many of them as we can imagine for implementation of the new law on higher education, because attention of the public to this process should be as big as we can afford. It's worth it. I would like to say, for starters, that in my view, implementation of the new law at least has two challenges at the level of institutional, the national, and this is about creation of new institution of high qualities like National Agency for High Quality of higher education, and presence of sufficient funds provided by the budget of our country. And the second level, this is level of its implementation at the grassroots. And this is about position of students, teachers, faculty, and technical staff, administrative staff. Taras yesterday said that they evaluated they've had more than 42 scores of new rates and 4 duties at the university. So the process is ongoing. And there I would like to turn the floor first to Minister Sergiy Kvit, and after that, in open discussion, we can continue. Thank you, Yegor. Dear colleagues, all the issues related to this new law on higher education, this is quite a set of laws. And first of all, I would like to thank you for coming. Thank you heartily, because we're trying to promote such ideas and support such ideas as much as we can. We have many assemblies with rectors and vice rectors, experts. We're raising awareness, trying to explain how this is happening, because implementation is a bigger challenge perhaps than introduction and adoption of the new law itself. And this new law can operate as a directly binding law. There are many norms that we can directly use, but in the majority of cases we need lots of pieces for the secondary education stratum. So we did it in two steps. Osvita.gov.ua is the new site where we monitor this process of implementation. And there we have to register universities to exchange experience of implementation through the website. Because, and on the other hand, we are preparing the secondary legislation at the level of ministries and systems of different working groups. And it is important to have immediately some feedback on this working or not working. So we hope that the website will help us. Also, the journalists will have it available, and members of the general public, I suppose. Now, after adoption of this new law, we will have two other steps: implementation as such, implementation per se. And to make this law effective and active, we have to amend some other laws. And the most important one among the amendments is about amendments to the budgetary code to make it possible to open accounts with the banks, to service such accounts on behalf of the universities so that they can move from the treasury accounts to the banks. This is an exercise of lobbyism. This is a separate assignment. And there we have to put emphasis. This is very specific. We're trying to work with all the universities, and we hope that we'll be able to support them as and you as journalists. By way of introduction, I would like to mention in passing the reason why we started with this law. We worked on the language for 3 years, but concept for university autonomy appeared in 2005. That's when and where we started after the Orange Revolution. So the academic environment, in fact, worked with that problem since 2005. That means that it was clear to everyone, for everyone, what had to be done and what had to be adopted. And this law provides universities with the opportunity to help themselves. So there's university autonomy, financial, housekeeping, and academic. Makes it possible for them to develop on their own account without any permits from the state, being supported by the independently gained funds. Secondary schools cannot operate like that. They to be supported by the state in a variety of aspects. And we have many threats. The last thing I would like to mention. The reason being that university autonomy is perceived by some as some kind of feud. And any rector does whatever one deems necessary, and there's such a threat. And I would like to give you one example. Yesterday, I suspended rector of this legal academy at the university. In its students are supporting Sergiy Kivalov. They mobilized, they're agitators, and they support him as candidate to the parliament. We have pictures, we have all sorts of exhibits and plenty of evidence. So I suspended him. This is a negative example because that Mr. Rector thinks that whatever he wishes to do on the campus, he can. A university as an autonomy, as an autonomous entity may remain on paper if we cannot afford an academic community that is active, and that's the target. Some faculty and studentship. They have their own needs, their own ideas. They support some things. They protest against some things. So one of the main issues is to pay attention to that another time, because we want to cooperate with the leadership, with the management, with the administration, with the rector, the students, faculty, technical staff. They should be active and they should be quite demanding. A rector requires things from faculty and technical staff and administration. The faculty from the students from faculty and the rector, and this is all mutual. That's how we can use this as a necessary and very free venue for venting all sorts of ideas, and in political terms, civic terms, academic terms. Of course, universities should be free from politics and should not be influenced by the political parties, but the members of that big community can belong to whatever parties they choose. Thank you very much. Perhaps one by one we can go. Esteemed colleagues, thank you very much for the invitation. And I would like to start saying that I'm never tired to repeat in different situations that with the adoption of the law on higher education, we have a miracle in its own right. The reason being that the ministry purposefully delegated a big part of its authority to universities. So that is about power. This is a very important phenomenon, and we have to remember about it. Yegor mentioned some calculations of ours. We have 7 new rights and 4 new duties indeed. Among those 4 new duties, 2 are very specific. I would like to draw your attention to them. This is about quality. One of them is creation of the internal audit, so to speak, the emphasis put on quality issues where university should create a culture, a medium of quality to become successful as a university. And secondly, it's about policy against plagiarism. I think this is a very important aspect that should be continuously maintained and reminded of. The Ministry of Education has special Deputy Minister, Mr. Andriy Hebka, whose mission is to be a watchdog of such matters. If we want to make a breakthrough fighting corruption in the academic environment, this will be a very important message for all our society. For that, we have to make specific steps. And the minister reminded us of it about that Odessa Law School. Another example I would like to present. Yegor did mention that we have this ongoing discussion on the rights for the National Agency for Quality Assurance. And when the members of that agency are elected, we have to elect 25 of them. There are certain risks. They should be elected by people from different environments, Congress of the state-run universities, Congress of the private universities, and the issue of who is to be elected. In the field, of course, there are no such or not enough change. Any candidate for an expert at the national agency should present for the society, for the public, all one's achievements and contribution, academic credits, so that he or she is actually closely reviewed by the public. In terms of plagiarism, so you should think twice or thrice or 10 times before you agree to become such an expert. If we are transparent there, if we are one there, we'll be able to remove many risks for formation of key agencies, because we do understand that activities of experts for the National Quality Assurance Agency, the key role or the function for the societal function will be to create the space of rapport, the space of trust for all the players, for all the actors. Of course, it's not going to be easy in any way. So there we need to be at one, the role of media. The media is very important. We have to discuss the changes, to implement the changes, and we have to discuss the conflicts where we have abundance of the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law should not be sterilized. And good morning, dear colleagues. I would like to share some considerations with you. First of all, it's a background story of creation of such laws. Maybe you do not remember, or all of you may not remember, that the previous law was adopted in 2002. That law was a result of a whole set of compromises that was quite patched. It was like a patch blanket. It was quite colorful, but not uniform in any way.
I'd like to tell you that this law started in February 2008 and it appeared in the summer of 2014. And this law, as opposed to the former one, we were able to preserve as a certain integrity. And this is as a result of not so much political compromise, but a certain desire from beneath to give certain rules to the game, because the former law was about, in this part we play volleyball, in this part we play handball, and here we play water polo. This law provides certain unified rules. Another thing that I would like to emphasize is that this law introduces into the field of the Ukrainian higher learning a number of things that are already standard and recognized for the European field of higher education, but are not so for our educational field. I'd like to tell you that this law tells about the necessity to adjust our national laws to the framework of European qualifications during the life. So how to make it like this, that the system of qualifications and competences that is being given in the higher school is corresponding to the needs of a market, of job providers. It's about student-centric teaching, the teaching where there is not a process of teaching and the process of transfer of knowledge, but the process of a joint production of knowledge between professor and the student, where they are partners on the same level. This is the second thing, and we can continue. The third thing that is extremely important to my mind, this law makes it our education system much more open. This law introduces such rules of the game that help us to actively participate in international cooperation of any kind where education is concerned. It makes double and triple diplomas things that are desirable for our educational system and not the hindrances on the way. It makes possible that people with other educational experience come here, and this opens opportunities for us to improve our qualification beyond the borders of our country. And the fourth point that I would like to end with, our system is very, I would say, stable, or maybe even more stable than is necessary. I think there's few other learning system, educational system in the world where a person can hold the same position for 20 or 30 years. And this law introduces this framework of rotation of people within the system, especially those who are managers of the system. So this is kind of a pusher that will push someone out and someone in. It will lead to the appearance of new faces, new ideas, and in the final count, it will lead to mass rotation and change of those who are trainers, major players on our educational field. Thank you. Dear colleagues, I won't share the euphoria where the law on higher education is concerned, because there is a number of challenges that we will have to overcome, that we will have to take into account. And the first challenge, we practically all know, it is connected to the activity of the state system of management and the role of the Ministry of Finance of Ukraine in all the processes. In reality, our Ministry of Finance interferes with the activity of our ministries, not only on the level of the management of finances, but also on the level of designation of directions. And this is a huge problem because all the euphoria can pass when the budget for 2015 is adopted, where the article on the university autonomy will be leveled. Besides, there's a number of other legislative acts, including the budget code, that limits autonomy, and the law that was in action before the 6th of September and now says that the rector approves the staff of the university, but de facto the budgetary requirements demand the agreement of this with higher bodies of power, and this is either with the Ministry of Education or, for instance, with financial department of different cities, like this is in my university. I always ask, if the fund of salaries is there, why there should be any recommendations about personnel? And if we have university autonomy, then not a single job description can provide you with the specific of the activity of a university. If this is, for instance, a university of culture, they have their own specifics. If this is a university specialized in economy, this is a totally different direction, and we still have specialization of our universities, and to take into account specific features of a department is practically impossible, because in a technical university approaches are like this, but there are totally different approaches in a university where they teach free arts. So one of the biggest dangers and challenges is the need to introduce many changes to many other documents, including the budget code, so that the reforms are not stalled, and we should not allow for such an influence of the Ministry of Finance as it has now. In the final count, the Ministry of Finance won't be willing to release the big sum of money that they own at the moment, and in the final count, the state treasury is freely managing this money of universities and even delays payments. The record I had when the payment for computers was delayed from November 2013 to April 2004, and this money was just donations, not even the money that we get for the education of students. So this is one of the challenges. Another challenge, I think, is the mental challenge, because the academic environment is used to working according to instructions, but we are not used to use freedoms and liberties. And I think that without special programs of education in the new academic culture, we will have very serious problems with the implementation of the law and the process of realization of the law in reality, because academic culture that they have in Western universities and the traditions, and we can word them as, what do you want? What would you like? They do not pass as swiftly. So we have to work in order to form this new academic culture. And the carriers of this academic culture in the university environment are few. So there could be significant problems with this, because you should be able to use freedom and new rights. The third danger is the level of management culture. Starting from the Ministry of Education and ending with our rectors and prorectors, heads of chairs. Because one minister or one deputy minister cannot change academic culture. They can give an impetus, then can direct, but this all will depend very much on how prepared will rectors be to use autonomy and to be responsible for the use of this autonomy. Because when you get rights, when you receive rights, you have to understand always that you get not only the rights, but also the responsibility, full responsibility for the realization of those rights. So I think that we have to very seriously work on so that we start to prepare new managers for the higher education spheres. The changes won't come soon. As a rector, I still have 4 years in front of me, and I will still have the right to be elected for another 5 years, and all other rectors have such rights. So, within the nearest 5 years, but in some cases for 7 or 8 years, the rectors won't change. Then another issue arises. You have to work with those rectors that are in place, and they have to be taught. From my point of view, there can be a lot of decisions, solutions, and approaches to put a stake on pro-rectors who are engaged in education work and scientific work, because they are more involved in the process of changes, and they have to be carriers of those changes to a significant extent. These are not very simple questions. I agree with Mr. Kvit that it is possible to that maybe to adopt a law was simpler than its forthcoming realization and making it a real mechanism of renewal of renovation of the education system. So we can hardly expect fast changes, but the law, of course, provides a great chance to the higher education so that it becomes modern and corresponds to the challenges that it faces now. In reality, Mr. Onisyuk took words out of my mouth, having said that there are many changes in the personnel sphere. I will probably dwell on this in order to launch a bridge to the second round of discussion. The new law does democratize to a significant extent the internal structure of universities, the limitation of the number of terms in office, and 5 years of the maximum term of office, and this also pertains to deans and heads of chairs. If we, within the time that is still left, and when I say we, I mean everybody involved in education, and there's a great significance attached to the Ministry of Education and universities and teachers, if we do not create an institute of a specialized preparation of education managers who have been taught in practice and in theory, and who manage the university or a department at the university according to the leading Western culture of this management, we will have a time bomb. And when the time will come to leave their positions, and this will happen sooner or later, although we do not know in reality, because the rector will be elected by all the teachers who have their main job in this university. These are not delegates from departments. And let's not hide this. The delegates, and while there's administrative resource and the universities, they are controlled by some of the candidates. And now all the teachers will be electors and part of the students. So there may be no supply while there is a demand. So I would like to start. This is not just about management. We have also mentioned the content, and Mr. Onisyuk told about this at the meeting with the rectors when we were presenting the site Osvita.gov.ua. Because since 2015, the structure of the programs should be changed. But will we have a new contact to fill this in? So we start the second round of the discussion, and I would like you to concentrate on these two issues. As far as personnel is concerned,
I think that our main reserve is in the fact that all our universities have the critical share of the faculty who enjoy doctorates and other degrees obtained in Western University. We have them in all the universities, though they are few, and many of them come back to Ukraine. People go for education and come back, and they never immediately accommodated. So according to the new law, and this is binding, directly binding or almost, each university now can recognize an international degree and accept this person as a member of faculty. There's one nuance. If this person does not go through the full cycle, it has to undergo some nostrification, but the universities are in position to immediately appoint them as professors for professorship. They can participate in university voting or election. So nostrification process is simplified, but I hope that the reserve of the faculty that were trained abroad in different forms, I hope that in the nearest perspective or in nearest future they will claim positions of professors, senior lecturers first, professors, heads of chairs, departments and universities, because the academic lifestyle of Western universities is very different from those of our universities. This is everyday life, this is adoption of curricula, this is how this is done, the rights of the students and so on. I would like to draw attention to this very important reserve. I would like to agree with the opinion that one of the biggest challenges for successful implementation of the law on higher education is to get as many supporters in the faculty as we can. It's not a secret to anyone that the academic environment, first of all, teachers, not as much students as teachers, are the most conservative. The lifestyle, the work style is prone to that, and they are locked up in their silos. Successful academics spend more time in the resource center than elsewhere. And there's this risk that when they elect new rectors, people usually at such elections vote for the status quo, not for some anti-crisis managers that are available for active changes. In order to make such teachers, your allies, you can find something in the law, not more than 600 hours, and as the workload, and for the Ministry, I'm sorry, for the Ministry of Finance. So that there are specific provisions to arrange this, but I would like to agree with Victor. It is very important for them to try freedom, to get to know the taste of freedom, to become tasters of freedom. And the Ministry of Education did start specific steps, very important steps, removing all the necessary burdens, like this law on credit and modular system, and cuts on the document circulation, document configuration. That should actually make academics, make teachers free as academics, and make them do things that they are supposed to do. I would like to touch upon two topics outlined by Yegor. But I would like to start with a very specific example. The administrative position, dean or head of program in a Chinese, not American, not Belgian, not English, but a Chinese university. For this position, we have somebody who graduated from one of the best Chinese schools with very high level of technical, fundamental, and humanitarian training. They usually have a degree from some US, Canadian, British, German, Australian university. This person in some other university, in some other jurisdiction, defended one's doctor degree and dissertation. And so they usually have had some postdoctorship position in the third country, and when they are 32, 35, they have this position in the Chinese university. They're usually surrounded by the same kind of people, and such people understand that this is not a dream, just a dream to be a manager. This is your time that you dedicate to the common cause, and then you come to your specific academic, come back to your specific academic interests. So here's the plan. We need people who are 30 to 35 now. For such people, we have to create the system of additional training that was already mentioned by my colleagues. A very specific example. We initiated in Poland a very good project, how to prepare two groups. One for academic managers who are getting ready from the position of the medium level of management for modern university management. Then they have the choice over an aspect that is very important for the university to prepare their micro project for implementation of their respective university, and then the best of the best get the opportunity to implement that in their respective university, and then they can impress us so much that we invite this person to a higher position. Then this cycle is repeated for another category, for the other category of people who need technological educational innovations. And we repeat that cycle. There are many people willing to support such projects. In the world and European educational community, so concentration of 30 to 35, the cohort, and understanding being a manager is not an academic dream and not the best career for an academic, and understanding of the fact that there are many other opportunities open, available, than staying a medium level academic manager, administrator at the university. Another matter is the essentials. People who worked in Ukrainian education in the 90s have the frustration and the sadness because it's over. It was very bad economically, but it was great in terms of introduction of the programs where we had no standards for offered by the state, no established delivery for such courses. So neither the ministry nor this new agency should try to impose the new standards as soon as possible to prepare new generations of regulations. I call upon you, you should respect the ministry. So we have to reduce the regulation and everything will flourish. Otherwise, development of our flower bed will be suppressed. So all the things related to the quality and the contents are about the sense of freedom and secondary orientation at those people who are studying. When we see this need in the professional realm, we can see the urge of the student, and he or she is guaranteed 25% of one's own individual plan of studies. We can see that we are on the right track and we can reach the consensus and hence get the success. If we should understand that name of our minister is Kvit blossom, and it's all blossoming. I'd like to apologize. I am just one blossom. The rest of blossoming is all fake. So we will believe that it will be blossoming indeed, because we need faith, not just the will. I would like to mention a couple of things related to what my colleagues mentioned and suggested. First of all, regulation and other nuances. If we think that at European universities there are no regulations, they do not compose reports, and there are no pro forma things, we would make a mistake, because there are plenty of such compliance matters. Now, speaking on the cancellation of the law of 2005, the credit and module system. It doesn't change anything. The order expired back in 2005 when they signed the order of then Minister Mr. Bakirov on European credit transfer system. And we can say that the Brussels course that were adopted in 2005 should be effective. Mobility for the student, mobility for the faculty, comprehensive system appreciated in all Europe and adopted there. So cancellation of that law has no significance, in my book at least. Now about the issues related to regulation and standardization. I would like to commend Mr. Kvit's initiative to counsel effective standards of education, because the standards that we have are about conservation of the Ukrainian legislation in terms of contents, in terms of aspirations and developments. Taras is well aware. He used to be a deputy minister at the Ministry of Education. In his day, we all know that the standards were crafted for the vision of one school in a specific sphere. Many standards in liberal arts were customized for the university, National University of Culture, as the chief lobbyists. So I can see no progress there. I can see no novelties or innovation for that matter. By and large, based on the effective standards, we actually preserve the past. And these are preservatives of the past. And we are not focused on members of faculty or any reviewers. They do not take into account any novelty, any innovation. On the contrary, it's all about compliance with the standards which are 5 to 10 years old. So the law, of course, now provides for a different interpretation of standards. So I think it's about time when we kiss the old obsolete standards goodbye, because they are keeping us in the past.
Thank you. We are now saying about the steps which are for long term, but the law has become effective, and there are many things which are to be made right now in the short term. And now the third round. There are more or less structured, regulated elections of the president. There are the rules on not combining different positions. The dean cannot be the head of the chair at the same time, for example. And Mr. Kvit mentioned there are some norms which are direct and they are to be implemented right now. And I will bring in such controversy. I am doing a lot of monitoring of the educational processes, and I am getting the signals that at the scientific councils, the presidents, they say, well, the law is the law, but no one knows what will be happening to it. Maybe there will be some amendments introduced, and we do not know. And it's not just there. There are different moods, but the society requires quick changes. And let us discuss these issues now. And this is the problem, because if I look at the law through the eyes of the rector, of the president, what we have been doing in the past, that was illegal, but it was normal for the world and European best practices. This law allows me to legalize in the university the norms. Like in Kyiv Mogila Academy, there's a doctorate school. There are 8 PhD programs, and they started from 2008. But in Ukraine, we legalize these types of programs only starting from now. We were cooperating with the Catholic University on that, but we needed the law. This is the third cycle of education, basically. And there is a possibility not to get approved by the ministry the personnel numbers of personnel. But when we meet with the colleagues, I say, use that, or maybe recognize the Western diplomas, PhD diplomas. No, just give us a special document that we can recognize it. They say no, the law is not enough. We need some document issued by the ministry. But I say, but we have the autonomy of the universities. There are rights. Please write to us, give us a document that we have the right. I believe that's like a psychological barrier. And the university's autonomy cannot be given as a gift. No one from above can tell you you can be free. The freedom is something you are fighting for. If there is such an instrument as the law on higher education, you have to use it as the law, and talking about organizational autonomy, financial autonomy, academic autonomy, you have to fight for that. Now people do not just take the law and try to do something new. That is the problem. I believe we'll be overcoming it step by step, but that's an objective problem. It's there. This could have been envisaged. There's a certain inertia, but I believe that this will be overcome. And I do hope that the academic community will become very active. Definitely, we do not have the right to go back to business as usual. And I will give you an example of our university. Every year, when we start the budgetary process and we define the priority directions of our work for the calendar year, we have identified that the law on higher education is to be among our top 5 priorities. We decided we want to be the leaders in implementing the new law on higher education, and then we will show how things work. And there are many things which we can start implementing just tomorrow. That's like an internal system of quality assurance, avoiding what Mr. Finikov said. He said about the reports on self-analysis when accrediting. That is the information about the university's budget, which is the key instrument of combating corruption. Besides interpreting the programs, defining which of the university programs are scientific or academic, transferring these programs so that some of them last for 2 years. That is important also to involve a wider academic community. In our university, we had several presentations for our students, for our teachers. What does the law mean? What changes can we expect? I believe these things should be happening in every university. And what's important, I believe the ministry has to identify 3 or 5 things which have to be implemented immediately, which are to be monitored in a year, so that we can see whether these things have been introduced or not. I would like also